I lived on $500 per month for a year, my extreme frugal finance challenge. When I first told people I was going to attempt living on just $500 a month, most laughed. Some thought I was joking, others thought I was crazy, and a few believed it was flat out impossible. In a world where rent alone often eats up more than that, how could someone realistically survive on such a shoestring budget? Not for a week, not for a month, but for an entire year. This challenge was never about proving how little I could spend for the sake of suffering. It was about testing the limits of frugality, redefining my relationship with money, and finding out whether happiness and fulfillment really depend on how much we spend, or if they're tied to something deeper that money can't buy. The first reality check came in the form of housing. Rent is usually the biggest expense, so if I wanted to succeed, I had to get creative. I couldn't afford a typical apartment, even split with roommates. I started looking for alternative options, and eventually found a tiny studio attached to someone's house. It wasn't glamorous. Barely enough room for a bed and a desk, and the bathroom had plumbing issues every other month. But it was dirt cheap compared to market rates. Negotiating directly with the landlord, paying in cash, and committing to a full year up front allowed me to secure the space for a fraction of what most people were paying. That decision alone accounted for half of my budget, meaning every dollar after rent needed to be stretched like elastic. Groceries became my second battlefield. Eating out was simply off the table, not even as a treat. I learned to cook almost everything from scratch and embraced a diet that was as much about function as it was about frugality. Rice, beans, lentils, oats, eggs, and seasonal vegetables formed the core of my meals. I learned the art of bulk buying, the power of discount bins, and even the underrated savings of meal prepping to avoid food waste. It wasn't glamorous, but it kept me healthy and full. There were weeks when my meals felt repetitive to the point of boredom, but over time I found small ways to add variety. Using spices creatively, experimenting with soups, or even learning to bake my own bread. What surprised me most was that I began to appreciate food more. When your choices are limited, even a simple homemade pizza feels like a feast. Transportation was another major challenge. Owning a car was out of the question. Insurance, gas, and maintenance would destroy my budget in a single month. Instead, I relied on an old bicycle I picked up at a thrift store and the occasional bus ride when the weather was unbearable. The bike wasn't perfect. It broke down multiple times, forcing me to learn basic repairs from YouTube videos. But over time, it became more than just a money-saving tool. It gave me exercise, fresh air, and a strange sense of freedom. I came to appreciate the slower pace of travel, the rhythm of pedaling, and the awareness of my surroundings. What I once saw as a compromise turned into a small joy. The biggest mental hurdle wasn't food or shelter, though. It was entertainment. Living in a consumer-driven culture, so much of our social lives revolve around spending. Going out to eat, catching a movie, grabbing drinks, shopping just for fun. With a budget that didn't allow for any of that, I had to rebuild my social life from the ground up. I spent more time outdoors, hiking, walking, exploring free local events. I rediscovered the library, not only as a place to borrow books but as a free workspace with Wi-Fi. I turned to hobbies that cost almost nothing: writing, sketching, playing old board games I found secondhand. At first, it felt isolating. Friends invited me out less, assuming I couldn't afford to join. But over time, I built new connections with people who valued experiences over spending. The simplicity of a long walk with a friend became more meaningful than any expensive dinner. Living on $500 a month also forced me to rethink how I define needs versus wants. Do I need new clothes, or do I just want them? Do I need the latest phone, or is my old one perfectly functional? Every purchase became deliberate, and in that deliberation I discovered just how often I used to spend without thinking. Impulse buying disappeared because it simply wasn't an option. If something wasn't essential, I didn't buy it. And if I did need something, I always asked, can I get it secondhand? Can I borrow it? Can I trade for it? This mindset shift bled into every corner of my life, and surprisingly, I never felt deprived. Instead, I felt a kind of clarity I'd never known before. Of course, there were sacrifices that hit harder than others. Winter was tough. Heating costs added up, and with my limited budget, I had to keep the thermostat lower than comfortable. I layered up indoors, slept under multiple blankets, and used hot water bottles like it was the 1800s. Social isolation was another tough one. Not being able to participate in many mainstream activities made me feel out of sync with others at times. And yes, there were moments of envy when I saw peers traveling, dining out, or upgrading their lives while I was patching up old clothes or fixing a leaky faucet in my bargain studio. But in those moments, I reminded myself of the bigger purpose. This wasn't just about deprivation, it was about growth. What I didn't expect were the hidden benefits. By stripping life down to its essentials, I discovered a resilience I didn't know I had. I realized how adaptable humans can be, how much we truly can live without. I found gratitude in small things, like a neighbor gifting me leftover food, or stumbling across a thrift store item I genuinely needed for a few dollars. I learned that creativity often thrives under constraint, whether in cooking, problem solving, or even finding joy. Instead of buying happiness, I learned how to cultivate it. By the end of the year, something incredible happened. I had not only survived on $500 a month, but I had saved money as well. Living below my means had become second nature. I had no debt, no credit card balances, and no stress about bills. Every dollar was accounted for, but instead of feeling trapped, I felt liberated. The challenge reprogrammed my financial habits in a way that no self-help book or budgeting app ever could. It was lived experience ingrained through daily practice, and it changed me permanently. Now, I'm not suggesting everyone should try to live on $500 a month. The specifics of my situation, cheap housing, a willingness to sacrifice comforts, and a stubborn commitment to the experiment, won't work for everyone. But the lessons are universal. We often spend far more than we need to, chasing upgrades, convenience, or fleeting pleasures that don't truly add value to our lives. By cutting back to the bare minimum, even temporarily, you gain perspective. You learn to appreciate what really matters, and you realize that true wealth isn't about how much you spend, but how little you actually need to feel fulfilled. Looking back, the challenge wasn't about money, it was about mindset. I learned that frugality is less about restriction and more about intentional living. It's about making choices aligned with your values, not society's expectations. It's about discovering that simplicity can be satisfying, and that happiness often hides in places money can't touch. Living on $500 a month for a year didn't just change my bank account, it changed my entire outlook on life.